And now for something completely different. Today we're going to have a shootout, but I don't want to have a shootout between pens. I want to have a shootout between papers. I was contacted via YouTube by Milo from the UK, and Milo said, we don't always have access to these fancy papers. I don't think these were his literal words, but that was the gist of his message. And he said, if I were to send you some cheaper papers I can get around here, would you be interested in doing a review? Now, of course I was, and I think that's actually a very, very good idea, because Rhodia paper is fantastic, but I don't use it on a daily basis at work. I don't use it to take notes. I use that to write people letters or do encyclopedia entries, whatever needs some high-end paper. But that doesn't mean that cheaper paper is bad. Some paper is, and some paper isn't. So today, I'm going to compare a bunch of different types of papers. I'm going to give you a short rundown here, and then the big part of the video will be just me writing on paper with different pens, different nibs, etc. So just do a rundown here, and then we go to the writing bit. I start with Clairfontaine paper, the Triumph. Triumph, I think, is very nice paper. It's by Clair. No, Comte. Well, these names always confuse me. Clairfontaine, nice paper. This is 90 grams per square meter. It's extremely smooth. Eric from FB Geeks often says it's like writing on glass, and I cannot find a better phrase for that. Extremely smooth, very white. Forget about the white balance. This is ultra white paper. It comes with a little liner sheet you can put under the paper so that you see the lines through the paper, because it is clear paper, no lines. Then I have Shootout Verger de France. Verger de France, this is paper. I have no idea of the paper weight at this moment. I thought it was actually 100 grams per square meter, but I could be wrong. Feel free to correct me in the comments. I didn't look it up, I should have. In any case, this is laid paper, and that means it's not a prostitute. It means it is paper that has a rib in it, which you can sort of hear. Sorry if that annoys you, but it's laid paper. I can put it close to the camera. I'm not sure how well you can see this because of the light. Probably not at all. You may be able to see that in the writing sample. The good thing about laid paper is that it looks beautiful. The ribs are very nice. The downside is that your pen can sort of get stuck behind one of those ribs. You'll see that later on. This is another, I think, of the papers I have here today, this is the most expensive. I think you pay about €8.50 for an A4 pad, whereas you pay $4.50 for the Clairfontaine paper I showed you earlier. But it's nice paper. Then we have Rhodia. What I have here is a dot pad, but you know there are a bunch of different Rhodia pads you can use. This has these very fine dots. This is 80 grams per square meter. Very smooth. I would say it's not as smooth as the Clair, but it's very close. This is one of the smoothest papers I own. Very nice, very white. You saw the other one that was champagne colored, I think, the Shootout paper. This is very white. I love it. Just simple staples on top. It doesn't look fancy, but it's great paper. And then finally, one bit of paper that I had myself. This is a Staples ring-bound pad. It's 80 grams per square meter. It's very white. It's also very smooth. I was surprised. Not as smooth as the Rhodia, but it's quite smooth. This is the writing I've done for the sample. Nice paper. I was pleasantly surprised by the quality of this. You'll see that later on. Then I have the three papers that Milo sent me. First of all, there is a W.H. Smith pad. Now, W.H. Smith's fun. There used to be one in Amsterdam, and it's gone for years. So just take a sip there. Interesting paper. A couple of things I like about this. It's A5. Now, for those of you in the US who don't understand European paper size, it's actually quite simple. Rhodia is not a good example. Wait, 1 second. Sorry, what you have here is an A4 sized pad. So A4 is the closest we have to letter paper from the US, letter size. Now, the bigger the numbers get, A4, A5, A6, the smaller the paper. So this would be A5, A4, A5. A5 is 2 times A4. 1, 2. A6 would be 2 times A5. A7 would be 2 times A6, etc. And the smaller numbers, so A4, A3, would be 2 times A4, etc. So that's how this works. Okay, so this is A5. I was surprised. It is 100 grams per square meter, which is heavy. But I had some issues with it. You'll see that in the writing. A couple of things I like about this. So 100 grams, that's pretty impressive. It comes with, I always call this a liner note, because as with the extra clear paper, you put it under the paper, you see the lines, and it's easier to write because it's clear paper, it's not lined. And then I saw the first sheet and I thought, wow, that's really off-white, and it's very coarse. But it has a built-in blotting sheet. This is blotting paper. And then under that you got the real paper. I love that. Beautifully conceived. I'm not sure whether they're the only one who does this, but it's nice because you put your liner under the paper, you can write, and when you have a bit of an ink spot, or you just haven't done a lot of writing, you just put that blotting paper in front of it, rub it, and you're done. Very, very nice. I like that feature. Then we have, by the way, Milo also gave me the prices. I should probably list that. Yes, what do we have here? W.H. Smith. Cost for an A4 pad would be £4 or about €5. Okay, then we have this. This is the pocketbook. I love the word pocketbook because it always reminds me of Sherlock Holmes. He tore a page from his pocketbook, scribbled a note, and entered the room. Something like that. A typical Sherlock Holmes language. So this is a smaller pad. And the Pukka pad, he says, at least I pronounce it as Pukka, it's P-U-K-K-A, Pukka. An A4 pad costs around £3, that will be about €3.75. It says pocket pad. It has an elastic closure band. It's a very hard cover, very hard cardboard. I enjoy that. And then it has the paper. The paper is 60 grams per square meter, so I think it's the lightest paper I have here. Which should make it the most prone to bleed through and that kind of stuff. You'll see that in a second, and that's pretty much it. Something I enjoyed is that at the back they put on a reorder code. So if you run out, you want to order it new, you find it here, and the website Pukka -pads.co.uk, and you can just order another one exactly like this. I think it's a smart marketing feature, but I actually enjoy that. I mean, it's useful if you want to have this. It also came with an IKEA pencil. I mean, this is an IKEA pencil, isn't it? You know what I mean, right? So it does come with that, which is nice, and you can put, a small pen in there too, if you happen to have one lying around, Okay, then finally, I have a pad. The second sample, Milo writes, is by a company called Black & Red. An A4 pad of this is around £5, €6.25. So that would be the most expensive paper. Sneak preview, I also thought it was the best. So I don't want to say you pay what you get what you pay for, but still. This is 90 grams per square meter paper, so it's quite heavy. 192 pages. This is A7 format. I'm just reading it from the back. Anyway, has a sort of plastic-ish cover. You can put your name in there. It's a sheet for that, like that, and dates of use, and if found, please contact, which is nice. And on the back end of that, it has a conversion table from the imperial system to metrics, which is good for speed and temperature too. Pretty nice. I mean, I think that's a pretty nice feature actually. And the paper, very smooth and nice to use. This is pretty cool, and it has this interesting elastic band, which is indeed red and black to close it up. I like that. Okay, so as to the test, I'm reaching around my laptop here. Oh, that was a pen. No, doesn't matter. Very briefly, the pens I use here will be the same as the ones I use for the Encyclopedia. And for those of you not familiar with that, I use a Noodler's flex pen. This is the regular nib creeper. Simple pen, has a flex nib, but also has a fine nib. So with no pressure it's a fine, with pressure it's a flex. So I can show you those two things. I use for medium a Monteverde Artista Cristal. I think it's a pretty good and regular medium nib. I chose pens that are accessible, right? So that everyone can, everyone could have a pen like this. I have a Lamy Safari in broad, which is a pretty wet writer and also very broad, so that's a good way to put the paper to the test. I have an Italics Parsons Essential in Italic Broad. Nice pen, good nib, but definitely a broad italic. Then I have a 6mm Pilot Parallel. This is a calligraphy pen, but it's very wide. It's unlikely you would use it on this type of paper, but just to give you an idea of an extremely wide nib to really force some bleed through in there. And then finally I use just one or two words with another pen, which is the Visconti Wall Street in a broad nib. The ink I use in this one is Simplicity's Violet by Ackerman, but in all the other pens I use this ink. Waterman Florida Blue, I call it Tifcaf, the ink formerly known as Florida, because now I think it's called Serenité. I use this ink because it's well behaved. I don't want to use some weird ink that's extremely wet and that feathers to an extreme amount in a test like this, because that would be unfair. So this is maybe a little bland ink, but it's a good ink. It performs well, and it'll get the job done, and it's not prone to feathering, etc. So when you use this, then at least you know that any feathering was not caused by the ink but by the paper. And that's all there's to it. So I'm sorry this introduction already was quite long. I hope that the writing sample will be of use to you. Milo, thanks a lot for sending me these samples. That's very useful. And we'll see what happens. So, the paper shootout. Let's go. Okay, so let's start with Triumph paper, Triumph Clairfontaine. This is an A5 pad. Comes with one of those little liner sheets. I like that. And then let's start with writing. Forget about the white balance. I had to use a desk light. It's a somewhat clouded day today here, so the paper is not really yellow or something. It's very, very white. So I'm sorry, but forget about the colors. Just look at the properties of the paper. This would be fine. This would be medium. This would be broad. This would be italic. And then we have some really wide stuff. Not doing my best calligraphy here, just something like that. So that would be a 6mm nib. And then it might be interesting to have, I thought, one other ink. I'll write the word fox. While jumps, I guess, the fox jumps. This would be Ackerman Simplicities Violet. So that's a very purple ink and a broad nib. And then finally, I think we should look at some flex writing. Okay, so this was the Triumph. Let's have a look at bleed through and that kind of stuff. Put that away. I think feathering is non-existent on this paper. That looks very good. Bleed through, nothing, not even with that very wide nib, not with the flex. I love this paper. It's very, very smooth. It's pleasant to the touch. It's very white. This is my #1 go-to paper. But we've got other papers today, some of which I've never tried. So, the second one is Gélalo Verger de France. This is a paper I really like. This was my first, somewhat more expensive paper. This is laid paper, as I said, so it has these ribs. Let's have a look at that. I don't have a liner for this, so I'll try to keep all of this within one page. Fine. You feel more tooth on this paper. That's because of those ribs. I guess this would be very nice ballpoint paper, but clearly I'm not going to use it for that. Broad. Love this nib, by the way. This is a Lamy Safari. Not at all an expensive pen. Fantastic nib. Nice, wet, very broad, just the way I like it. Italic. Yeah, so this pen suffers. On this paper, you can hear it with these lines. Yeah, you can see it too. It's the because of those ribs in the paper and the breadth of this nib. It seems to skip a bit more. This pen doesn't skip, it's just that the paper interferes. So that's one thing I don't like about this paper. It looks fantastic, but it's, you know, because of those ribs, they're both a blessing and a curse, I think. Okay. So we have the really wide nib. We have another pen with another ink. You see there was a bit of a skip. This paper encourages that. So, and then finally let's do some flex. Can you hear that? That's not scratch. Again, those are those ribs, tick, 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 that you pass by. Fantastic paper. I love this. It's beautiful. It's thick. It's heavy. Because of its laid qualities, it looks fantastic. But writing on it is not always a pleasure, especially with broader nibs. They tend to get a little caught a little bit behind these ribs. But apart from that, very interesting. When it comes to bleed through, there is none. Maybe you can see a little bit of shade through here, but that's actually just, I think, the impression left by the pen. It's not really the ink you see through it. So very fascinating paper. Okay, then we have Rhodia. This is an A4 size pad. Sorry about the light reflection here. So Rhodia, this is a dot pad. More space here. Let's have a look at what this paper can do. First we have fine. Nice and smooth. I like this, the smoothness of this paper. It took me a while to get some Rhodia. I started with Shootout and then I moved on to Clairfontaine. But I think Rhodia is great. It's very smooth, not as smooth as Exa Clair, the Clairfontaine, if you ask me, but it's quite close, and it's very pleasant to use. You can. This is the dot version. You can also get it squared. You can get it. What do you call that? Checkered? No, what do you call that in paper? You know what I mean. With little squares. You can get it with lines. You can get it clear. So there's a lot of options. As far as I know, you can only get the Clairefontaine paper clear, so no dots or whatever. So this was medium. Pen glides across the paper, very pleasant to use. This could be an everyday paper. This is not so expensive that it would be a waste to use it on a daily basis, and it's pleasant enough. I mean, Clairefontaine is really smooth and may not be that well suited for every purpose. I shouldn't talk and write at the same time. That was broad, italic. Ultra broad nib. Too much pressure. Love these pilot parallels, very nice for calligraphy. And a bit of flex. Oh no, wait, first we had the other pen. The smoother the paper, I think, the easier it is to get hard starts. That's why I was fiddling around a bit. I think the nib doesn't have any purchase on the paper, so it just, sorry, it takes a bit longer for the pen to start. Flex. Okay. Let's see what the damage is. So, writing, no feathering, as on the other two papers I've done up to this point. No feathering, works well, pleasant to use. Bleed through, not really, maybe a little bit of shade through there. And with the flex writing, but for normal writing, nothing. So that's very good. Okay, then I'm going to use some Staples paper. This is a simple ring-bound notepad. This actually has a ballpoint on it. There's also one which has a fountain pen on it, but I couldn't find that. Let's have a look at what this does. So what we have here is F, fine, and a dog going crazy outside. Yet another ballpoint user tries to enter the house and is killed by the dogs for jumps over the... To quote the old saying, use fountain pens or roller balls and you won't have to die. But if you are a ballpoint user, you can kiss your ass goodbye. Lazy dog. This paper is pleasant to use. It's smooth. Smoother than you might expect for such a mainstream paper, if I may say so. I feel I wouldn't call it tooth, but it's a little less smooth than the Rhodia, but it's still very smooth paper. So it's not at all bad quality. I was pleasantly surprised by that. And of course I think it is 80 grams or something, so it's not at all bad. Then we have an italic nib. Time to pull out my big one again. There we go. The beauty of these pilot parallels is that you can actually use the corners to do these fine lines with. This is impossible with a dib nib, so it's actually very interesting to try and do this. Sorry for the sniffing, guys. My cold is leaving me, but still, it's there a bit. Fox jumps. And then finally some flex writing. Yes, I feel a little bit more resistance when using this paper, but I'm not at all, how shall I put that, underimpressed by the quality. It's a very nice paper to use. So, feathering, well, in all honesty, I don't see any feathering, not even with the flex writing, not with the broad nib and the other ink. Bleed through. Nothing really. Not for the regular writing, maybe a little bit of shade through with that really wide nib again, but even with the flex nib I don't see any actual bleed through, just a little shade through. Okay, let's move to the papers Milo sent me. Here we have this notepad by W.H. Smith, 50 sheets, A5, 100 grams. So first I thought, that's strange paper, right? Told you that. Here we go. It has a nice watermark in it, as does the newer Gelano paper, by the way. Well, let's see what this does. Start with fine. Feels good. It feels fairly smooth. Doesn't catch the pen, if you know what I mean. No toothiness there. But it gives a pleasant type of feedback. I enjoy that. You feel that you are writing. Another ballpoint user. This nib is superb. The paper is fantastic with this. Quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. And do you see what I see? See a little bit of feathering there. I'll do another few dashes just to see what happens. Yep, there we go, feathering. Then we have an italic nib. Okay, and another nib, another pen, another ink. Oh, sorry, I should have moved the paper up a little. Oh no, wait a minute. First we do the big one, right? This is going to be interesting. Because that's a lot of ink. Now we do the other nib with the other ink. Write straight away. And finally some flex writing, and I think that's going to feather. Just a prediction. Whoops. Got snagged on my plastic underlay to cover the paper with, protect it from oils from my hand. Okay, let's have a look at what's going on here. Tear off the page. W.H. Smith. Fine writing, fantastic. Medium writing, great. But you see a little bit of feathering. I'm not sure how well you can see it, but excuse me, it's there. You see it with this A, for example. When we come to broad, of course, that's a lot of ink. And with these dashes, you kind of see the effect, right? Let me use a very fine nib to point that out. So here you see these sort of feathering bits of circles. It happens. With the italic, it actually seems to be fairly under control. You see a little bit, but it's pretty much under control. With the really wide nib, you see it at the spots where a lot of ink is laid down. With this nib, there doesn't seem to be a problem at all, and that's a broad Visconti nib, so those are serious writers. You see a little bit of feathering there. And then with flex writing, putting down a lot of ink on the page, you see quite some feathering. But that is when you use broad on nibs. With a fine nib, this should be okay. With a medium nib, well, it's okay, I guess. I've seen less feathering, but let's face it, I mean, this is a paper you could use for everyday writing. If you would have to expect some feathering. But, then again, by the way, question, bleed-through. Okay, bleed-through is present. You can see that. I nearly forgot about that, sorry. Flex, really wide nib, broad nib, so the bleed-through is there. Question, what happens when I use that built-in sheet of blotting paper straight away? Broad nib. Let's use a bit of here, there's no bleed-through here. Wanted to do that quickly, so there you go. There's ink on the blotting paper now. Well done, well done. So you still see a little bit, but this is, come on, this is pushing it. How many people use broad nibs every day? I know a lot of you use fine nibs and medium nibs, so maybe this is just something for me. I have a fine nib right here. And you get some feathering, but that's just because I sort of push the ink into the paper, right? Okay, so interesting paper. I love how this comes with its own sheet of blotting paper. I think that's very interesting. I would consider using this on a daily basis. It may bleed through a little, but you know, if you're just making quick notes, don't use too broad a nib, you may be fine here. Let's have a look at this black and red. Okay, so this was, let me see, black and red. You can get this in A4 too. Let's have a look at what this does. What is it? Does it say anything in paperweight here? I know I already read that, but 90 grams. Okay, just to give me an idea. Now, of course, this is these are very small sheets, right? So I'll just have to move it around a bit. I'll put a bottle of ink on top of the pad so that it doesn't actually move. Let's not use this first sheet. It's okay. Here we go. I'll do my best to write as big as I did in the other page and just use a couple of pages. So here we have fine. That's a strange Z. Of the lazy dog. Okay. Paper is pretty smooth. Yeah, it's nice. It feels nice and smooth. Works well. You can feel your nib move a little bit in a good way. A little bit of tooth, maybe. Bleed through on this? None. But that was fine. When it comes to feathering, I would say none. This is something I just wiped out with my fingers. Let's have a look at some medium nibs. Actually, it's one nib, so it's medium nibbage. Bottle of ink back there. Medium. That was medium. I don't see any feathering. It's nice and smooth paper, still a little wet. No bleed through, yet again. Okay, and then we have the broad nib. I'll just wait and see what happens, but so far I don't see any feathering, even in these spots where it's very wet. Looks pretty good to me. Bleed through? None. Once again, I think this is pretty impressive paper. Italic. I hate it when that happens. The corner of the nib got stuck in the paper. That makes a very annoying noise. Liquid brown fox. Jumps. Jumps? Jump. This isn't, well, you know what it is. It's an M. Jumps over a lazy dog, you see. See any feathering? You see any feathering? I don't see any feathering. It's not even Bay State Blue. I wasn't bashing Bay State Blue. I was just referring to a video. Never mind. I don't see any bleed through. I'm impressed with this paper. I'm sorry for ruining it with just these scribbles, but have to work with what I've got. You know what? I do actually care about the environment. I use the backs of those papers, the other sides. And there's no bleed through, as you can see here, so that should be fine. The big nib. Very nice. No bleed through. Sorry, I don't know about bleed through, I'm not actually clairvoyant. No feathering, it seems. Even in these very wet spots, I don't see any feathering. Let's just wait, I'll just keep talking for a bit. You know, I might as well do the flex, sorry, I just hit the tripod. I may as well do the flex on this bit of paper. While we're here anyway, right? Flex. I still don't see any bleed through. I am very impressed with this paper. I'm just going to use a sheet of blotting paper to make sure that dries up. Even then, with this abuse, there is a little bit of feathering there, but I mean, I just, you know, I pushed it into the paper. So look at this. This is a lot of ink. There is no feathering, so I caused this, not the paper. Then the other ink. This is not bleed through, just seeing here, this is just ink from the other side of the page that was too wet. Nice and smooth, pleasant quality of writing. I like this paper. Maybe that wasn't clear yet, but it is. I love it. Again, no bleed through. So this looks very good. I'll just leave that to dry here for a second. Okay, then we have the final pad, a pocketbook. By Puka. I'm just going to call it Puka. Sounds good. That was probably the price that was there. Comes with a pencil. Nice. Looks like IKEA pencils to me, but I'm not a pencil man anyway. Lined paper. Do we have 60 grams? Okay, that's going to be fun. Let's start off with a fine nib. I'll try to get more writing on this page. Fine. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. La 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 la. Now I'm going to write la la over the lazy dog. There we go. Medium nib. How would the sound if this would be a metal band? The quick brown fox jumps over. I could be a one-man band. Broad. Putting this paper really to the test. I don't think it's going to like this. Notice how it drains, the ink sort of is sucked into the paper. This is going to feather. Okay. So, italic nib. I'm still waiting to see what this actually does. Ooh, yeah, baby. The ink, what would you call this? Bleed through it all, sir? It's even on the other page. So, this paper bleeds through. feathering isn't even as bad as I thought it would be, but clearly it's present, right? You can see it around the edges, these little marks. It was very pronounced on the W.H. Smith paper, and I'm glad it was. That was a good way to show you what I mean by feathering. But it's here too. Let's use the italic nib. Italic. The paper is nice to use. It's quite smooth, and a nib like this just glides across it, which I like a lot. I think this would be a fantastic ballpoint paper. I have to dig deep here, but this pen, this is a ballpoint. Now you think I should probably kill myself, but if you know any Dutch, you can read the inscription. It says van opa, which means from granddad. This pen belonged to my grandfather, and he a few days before he passed away, he said he wanted me to have it, but we had to have it engraved with this. So I have this in a very special place in my desk drawer. Let me see, because I think it does write. I hardly ever use it, but you know, clearly it has some emotional significance. I think if I use this, feels great. Paper is very smooth. No resistance for a ballpoint. And clearly that won't bleed through, because it's a ballpoint. This, however, the italic, is definitely bled through. Okay, now we need to do something. I'm afraid this is going to be an R-rated mess here with this nib, but we'll see what happens. I was actually tempted, whatever. What am I doing? I'm not even sure which script type this is. There's something in between Gothic and Old English. Look how the paper immediately sucks up the ink. Look at the difference. Why do I got another sheet I can abuse yet again? Here we go. Okay, look what happens here. This is that red and black pad. A nice wet line, right? It's wet. Look at this. Look at how the paper sucks in the ink. You can see it happening. And it's dry. It immediately dries because it is sucked into the paper. Now, feathering, clearly. Bleed through. Well, with this bleed through, ho ho ho! And it's not on this side of the paper because I put a plastic sheet under this. Yeah, that's fascinating. Let's have a look at the other nib, the Visconti nib. That skip was really caused by me, not by the paper. Feathering. Bleed through. Okay, so I think we've seen enough here. What is my conclusion? Well, let's not go into those expensive papers, because you've seen, I mean, whether it's Clairfontaine, Rhodia, Gelalo, they all work well. But you know, then we have these papers. A quick recap. This was the Staples paper. I am impressed. I have to say I am impressed. No feathering, no bleed through. For a pretty cheap pad, I think that's impressive. So as far as I'm concerned, if you're a fountain pen user, consider these Staples notebooks, I mean, 80 sheets, A4, 80 grams per square meter. Impressive, impressive. W.H. Smith, fascinating paper. I love the package. I love how you get a liner page with it and a sheet of blotting paper. I think that's very nicely conceived. When it comes to the actual paper, it suffers. The broader the nib, the more it suffers, the more feathering you see. It has a nice pattern in it, some type of watermark, but feathering is bad and bleed through is quite pronounced. So if you are like me, you like broader nibs, then in all honesty I don't think this is the paper for you, unless you have the discipline to write a few words, use the blosser paper, write a few words again, etc. But let's face it, if you're taking lecture notes, for example, that's just not going to work. So this fascinating paper, I love it. Ballpoint users will be very happy with this, I'm sure, because it seems to be pretty smooth. Oh yeah, it's very smooth. So for a ballpoint user, it's great. People with very fine nib pens, I got an Asian fine. There's nothing wrong with the paper. I mean, it's very smooth. It's pleasant to use. It's just that it bleeds through, and it feathers. But again, I like the fact that they actually came up with the blotter paper built in, etc. Okay, then we have the pocket book by Puka. Has some nice features. I like the fact that it comes with its own little pencil. You could probably take some other pen. Let me see. There I got that Jinhao pocket missile. Looks like that fits in there very well. And that's a very fine nib, so I guess if I were to write with that, it doesn't really feather, and there is not a whole lot of bleed through. So if you go for very fine nibs, I think this paper should work out for you. And of course, again, comes with a pencil, has this little elastic closure thing. I think it's a pretty nice package, but with medium or broader nibs, it's going to bleed through quite badly. So, you know. Finally, we have this black and red. I was impressed. I have to say, I was impressed by the performance. The paper is smooth, feels nice to the touch, and bleed through is absolutely minimal. No real feathering. Again, this feathering was caused by me using a sheet of blotting paper. If I would have left that to dry, just to convince you, let's have a look what happens. We got some wet flex writing. I'll just continue talking. I saw no real bleed through. I saw no feathering. I think it works very well. You can get this in A4 pads. If it helps to convince you, I'm actually considering to find me an A4 pad of this, because it seems to work very nicely, and would definitely be an alternative to say Clairfontaine paper. As you can see, this is drying up. There is no feathering. There is no real bleed through, just a little bit of shade through right there. And that's all there's to it. So, Milo, thanks a lot for sending me these samples to do this video. I had a lot of fun doing it and discovering what the papers were like. I hope this is useful. I hope this will help people in selecting papers for everyday jobs, and that's pretty much it. So thanks a lot, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.